What would you do if you saw a frail, elderly man being mercilessly humiliated in public by a rich, arrogant bully? Would you look away, telling yourself it's not your problem? Or would you risk everything, your job, your security, your future, to stand up for a complete stranger? For a 24-year-old waitress named Maya Thompson, buried under a mountain of student debt and family medical bills, this wasn't a hypothetical question. It was a choice she had to make on a Tuesday afternoon that started like any other. And her answer, a single act of courage in a small Boston cafe, would detonate a chain of events so unbelievable it would change her life and the landscape of a billion-dollar empire forever. Stay with us to hear the incredible true story of the waitress who took a stand. The Gilded Spoon wasn't the fanciest cafe in Boston, but it pretended to be. Located on a picturesque corner of Beacon Hill, it catered to a clientele that appreciated its overpriced lattes and the illusion of old-world charm. For Maya Thompson, it was simply the place that paid the bills. Or more accurately, the place that paid a fraction of the bills, leaving the rest to fester in a growing pile of dread on her small kitchen table. Maya was a ghost in her own life. She moved through the world with a quiet efficiency that was often mistaken for contentment. She was sharp with a degree in economics she'd fought tooth and nail for, but the promised doors had remained stubbornly closed. Instead, she was an expert in the subtle art of the service industry: how to smile when a customer was rude, how to balance 3 piping hot plates on one arm, and how to calculate down to the penny how many extra shifts she'd need to cover her mother's next prescription copay. Her mother Sarah was the silent, steady anchor of her world, a woman whose former vibrancy was now muted by the relentless progression of multiple sclerosis. The medical bills were a constant, crushing weight, turning Maya's dreams of a career in finance into a distant, mocking fantasy. On that fateful Tuesday, the afternoon rush was in full swing. The air was thick with the scent of roasted coffee beans and the low hum of conversations. Maya was navigating the narrow space between tables when the front door chimed, admitting 2 figures who would irrevocably alter the course of her life. The first was a young man in his late 20s, Chadwick Chad Sterling III. He didn't walk. He swaggered as if the world were a red carpet laid out for his personal benefit. His suit was a shimmering sharkskin Tom Ford that likely cost more than Maya's car, his watch, a Patek Philippe that gleamed with arrogant confidence. His date, a woman named Tiffany, who looked more sculpted than born, clung to his arm. The second figure, who entered a moment later, was his complete opposite. He was an older gentleman, perhaps in his late 70s, with a kind, wrinkled face and eyes that seemed to hold a gentle wisdom. He was dressed in a simple, well-worn tweed jacket, comfortable slacks and sturdy-looking boots. He carried a worn copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations and moved with a quiet, unassuming grace. He looked like someone's beloved grandfather, out for a quiet afternoon read. He found a small, unoccupied table in the corner and settled in, becoming just another part of the cafe's scenery. Chad and Tiffany, however, made a point of not being part of the scenery. They took the best table right in the center, and Chad immediately began speaking in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, boasting about a recent acquisition his father's company, Sterling Industries, had just made. "It was a hostile takeover, babe," he declared, snapping his fingers at Maya for a menu. "You have to be a shark in this world. You eat or you get eaten." Maya forced her professional smile. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. Can I get you started with something to drink? 2 glasses of your most expensive champagne," Chad said, not even looking at her. "And don't take forever. My time is literally money." Maya nodded, her smile tightening at the edges, and turned to put in the order. Her manager, a perpetually nervous man named Gregory scurried over to Chad's table, offering fawning pleasantries. Gregory knew who paid the biggest tips and who to keep happy. Meanwhile, the old gentleman in the corner had ordered a simple black coffee and was lost in his book. He seemed to be an island of tranquility in the sea of Chad's blustering ego. For 45 minutes the cafe existed in this state of tense equilibrium, the quiet dignity of the old man on one side, the loud vanity of the young one on the other, and Maya trying to navigate the space between them. The tipping point came with a careless, insignificant movement. The old gentleman reaching for a sugar packet brushed against the leg of Chad's table. It was the faintest of jostles, barely enough to register. But a single tiny drop of condensation from Chad's water glass fell from the table and landed on the pristine fabric of his Tom Ford suit trousers. The world seemed to stop. Chad looked down at the minuscule wet spot as if he'd been shot. His face, which had been a mask of smug satisfaction, contorted into a snarl of theatrical rage. "Are you kidding me?" he bellowed. Standing up so abruptly, his chair screeched against the floor. Every head in the cafe turned. The old man looked up from his book, startled. "Oh, I do beg your pardon, son. I am so sorry. A clumsy mistake." A clumsy mistake. Chad's voice dripped with venom. He pointed a finger at the old man. "You see this suit? This is bespoke. It costs more than your entire pathetic life's savings. And you old relic, just stained it with your carelessness." Maya, who was clearing a nearby table, froze. A cold knot of anger formed in her stomach. The old man remained calm, his expression one of sincere apology. "It was just a drop of water, young man. I'm sure it will dry without a mark. But again, I am truly sorry for startling you. Don't you talk down to me?" Chad sneered, his voice getting louder. "People like you have no respect for nice things because you've never had them. What did you do, wander in here from a park bench? This isn't a shelter." The cruelty of the words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. The old man's face didn't fall, but a flicker of deep sadness passed through his eyes. He slowly placed a few dollars on the table for his coffee and began to stand, intending to leave quietly and end the confrontation. But Chad wasn't finished. He was performing now, feeding off the attention of the silent, captive audience. He savored the humiliation he was inflicting. "Look at him, Tiffany," he said, with a cruel laugh. Running away. Probably needs to get back to his cardboard box before someone takes his spot. That was it. Something inside Maya snapped. The months of swallowing insults, of smiling through gritted teeth, of feeling powerless, it all boiled over. She saw not just a rude customer and a victim, but a reflection of every injustice she'd ever felt. She saw the bullies of the world preying on the quiet and the decent. Her manager Gregory was already rushing toward the old man, his hands flapping nervously. "Sir, please, perhaps it's best if you leave. We don't want any more trouble." He was siding with the bully. Of course he was. Maya set her tray down with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. She took a deep breath and walked directly into the center of the storm. Maya placed herself between Chad Sterling and the old gentleman, creating a physical barrier. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her voice when she spoke was shockingly steady. "That's enough," she said. Her eyes locked on Chad's. Chad looked her up and down, a smirk playing on his lips. "Excuse me, did the help just say something?" "I said that's enough," Maya repeated, her voice gaining strength. This gentleman apologized. He did nothing to warrant this kind of vicious public humiliation. "You, on the other hand, are disrupting every single person in this cafe with your childish tantrum over a drop of water." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Tiffany's perfectly painted mouth fell open. Gregory's face went pale with horror. The old gentleman watched Maya with a look of profound surprise. Chad's smirk vanished, replaced by a mask of pure fury. "Who in the hell do you think you are? You're a waitress. Your job is to take my order and stay invisible. You don't get to have an opinion. My job is to serve customers, not to stand by while you abuse an elderly man," Maya retorted, the words flowing with a conviction she didn't know she possessed. "There's a code of basic human decency, and it doesn't matter how much your suit costs or what watch you wear. You don't have the right to treat another human being like they are less than you." "Maya, what are you doing?" Gregory hissed, grabbing her arm. "Stop this right now." Maya shook him off. She wasn't just talking to Chad anymore. She was speaking to the entire room, to the silent onlookers who had done nothing. We see it every day, don't we? People with power, with money, thinking it gives them a license to be cruel, and we all just sit there and let it happen, because we're afraid. Afraid of losing a tip, of losing a job, of causing a scene. Well, I'm not afraid anymore. She turned her gaze back to the old man, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. "Sir," she said, her voice softening. "On behalf of the Gilded Spoon, I sincerely apologize for the treatment you've received here. Your coffee is on the house. Please, you don't have to leave." This was the ultimate act of defiance. She had not only confronted the wealthy customer, but had overridden her manager and offered a freebie, a cardinal sin in Gregory's penny-pinching playbook. Chad let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me. You're apologizing to him?" He turned to Gregory, his eyes blazing. "Are you going to let your little charity case employee speak to me like this? Do you have any idea who my father is? Richard Sterling, Sterling Industries. I could buy this pathetic little coffee shop with my pocket money and turn it into a public restroom just for the fun of it." Gregory trembled, seeing his career flashing before his eyes. He rounded on Maya, his face a mess of fear and anger. "Maya, you're fired. Get your things and get out. You are finished here." The words hit her like a physical blow. Fired. Just like that. The floor seemed to drop out from beneath her. The weight of her mother's medical bills, the rent, the student loans, it all came crashing down on her in that one awful moment. For a second, a wave of panic and regret washed over her. What had she done? But then she looked at the old man's face. He was still watching her. But now there was something else in his eyes, not pity, but a deep, quiet respect. In that instant, she knew she had done the right thing. She had lost her job, but she hadn't lost herself. "Fine," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but her chin held high. She untied the strings of her apron, the familiar fabric suddenly feeling alien. She folded it neatly and placed it on the table. She looked at Chad one last time, not with anger, but with a kind of weary pity. Then she turned to the old man. "I hope the rest of your day is better, sir," she said softly. Without another word, she walked past the stunned patrons, past the furious face of Chad Sterling and the terrified one of her now former manager, and pushed through the door of the Gilded Spoon, leaving her job and the wreckage of her financial stability behind her. As the door chimed shut, the old gentleman finally moved. He looked at the scene, the triumphant bully, the spineless manager, the silent customers. He picked up the few dollars he had left on the table, walked to the counter, and placed a crisp $100 bill down. For the coffee, he said to the stunned cashier, his voice calm but resonant, and for the young lady's severance. He then turned and looked directly at Chad Sterling. For the first time, the gentle, grandfatherly demeanor fell away, revealing something else beneath it. Something hard, ancient, and powerful. His gaze was so sharp and penetrating that Chad for the first time felt a genuine flicker of unease. The old man didn't say a word. He just held Chad's gaze for a long, silent moment before turning and walking out of the cafe, his copy of Meditations held firmly in his hand. The walk back to her small apartment in Alston was a blur. The adrenaline that had fueled Maya's defiance had evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hollow dread. The reality of her situation was a physical weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Fired. She kept replaying Gregory's voice, the venom and fear laced in his words. She unlocked the door to her apartment, a space that had always been her sanctuary, but now felt like a ticking time bomb. Every object was a reminder of a bill, the refrigerator humming with electricity, the faucet dripping precious water, the lease agreement tucked away in a drawer. She sank onto her second-hand couch, the worn fabric doing little to comfort her. She pulled out her phone and opened her banking app. The number staring back at her was pathetically small. After rent and sending money to her mother, she had exactly $287.42 to her name. It was supposed to last her until her next paycheck, a paycheck that would now never come. Panic began its icy ascent up her spine. How would she pay for her mother's next round of medication? It was a new experimental drug, not fully covered by insurance, and it cost a fortune. But it was working. It was the first thing in years that had brought some relief, some semblance of her old mother back. The thought of telling her mum that she couldn't afford it was more devastating than losing the job itself. The next few days were a special kind of hell. Maya fell into a frantic routine of despair and fruitless effort. She spent hours online, polishing her resume, sending it out to dozens of financial firms, consulting agencies, even other restaurants. The replies were a symphony of polite rejection. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. Position has been filled. Overqualified for this role. Underqualified for that one. Most of the time, there was just silence. Her confidence, already fragile, began to crumble. The heroic act at the cafe now seemed like a foolish, reckless indulgence. She had sacrificed her stability for a principle, but principles didn't pay the rent. She found herself growing bitter, replaying the scene in her head. The smug look on Chad's face, the fear in Gregory's eyes, the apathy of the other customers. The world really was run by the Chads, and people like her were just collateral damage. Even the memory of the old man's respectful gaze felt like a hollow comfort. He was probably a retired professor or a librarian, a kind soul with no real power in the world. His gesture of leaving the $100 bill was kind, but it was a drop in the ocean of her debt. A week after she was fired, just as she was starting to consider selling her plasma, a letter arrived. It was different from the junk mail and bills that usually clogged her mailbox. The envelope was made of thick, creamy cardstock, her name and address written in elegant, crisp typography. In the top left corner was an embossed seal she didn't recognize, a stylized V intertwined with a globe. Beneath it the words, Vance Consolidated Holdings. She'd never heard of them. She assumed it was some kind of high-level scam or a credit card offer, disguised as something important. With a sigh of weary resignation, she tore it open. Inside a single sheet of matching letterhead read, Dear Ms. Maya Thompson. This letter serves as a formal invitation to an interview for the position of Executive Assistant to the Chief Executive Officer at Vance Consolidated Holdings. We have reason to believe your unique skill set and personal attributes align with the core values of our organization. The interview is scheduled for Friday, August 29th at 10:00 a.m. at our corporate headquarters located at 1 Federal Street, Boston. The starting salary for this position is negotiable, beginning at $250,000 per annum, plus a comprehensive benefits package and performance-based bonuses. Please confirm your attendance with my office at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Eleanor Vance, Head of Human Resources. Maya read the letter once, then twice, then a third time, her brain struggling to process the information. It had to be a mistake, a cruel, elaborate prank. Executive assistant to the CEO, $250,000 a year. Her a fired waitress with an unused economics degree. She had never applied for a job at Vance Consolidated Holdings. She had never even heard of the company. She searched the name online, and her jaw dropped. Vance Consolidated wasn't just a company, it was a global behemoth, a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm with investments in technology, sustainable energy, and pharmaceuticals. They were a titan of industry, known for their aggressive yet ethical business practices. Their CEO, Arthur Vance, was a legend in the financial world, a reclusive, almost mythical figure, known for his sharp mind and unwavering integrity. He was often called the last gentleman of Wall Street. There were few photos of him online, mostly grainy ones from decades ago. This made the letter even more absurd. It was like getting a personal invitation from the Pope to discuss theology. It was impossible. Her first instinct was to throw the letter away. It was a mistake, and showing up would only lead to further humiliation. But a tiny, persistent spark of curiosity flickered within her. How did they get her name, her address? Why, her desperation was a powerful motivator. Her bank account was still hovering near zero. She had nothing to lose but a bit of time, and whatever was left of her dignity. What if it wasn't a mistake? The thought was so wild, so audacious, that it was almost intoxicating. With a trembling hand, she picked up her phone and dialed the number on the letterhead. She decided to go. She would walk into the lion's den, if only to find out why she'd been invited in the first place. Friday morning arrived with a grey, imposing sky that mirrored Maya's anxiety. She stood before her meager wardrobe, feeling a fresh wave of inadequacy. What does one wear to an interview for a $250,000 job at a multi-billion-dollar corporation? She settled on her one interview outfit, a simple black blazer and slacks she'd bought at a discount store years ago for her college senior presentations. It was clean and professional, but she felt like a child playing dress-up. The address, 1 Federal Street, led her to a colossal skyscraper of gleaming black glass and steel that seemed to pierce the clouds. The name, Vance, was etched in discreet but solid silver letters above the revolving doors. This wasn't just an office building, it was a statement of power. Taking a deep breath, she walked into the lobby. The inside was even more intimidating. The floors were a vast expanse of polished black marble. The ceiling soared 3 stories high, and a silent, mesmerizing waterfall cascaded down a granite wall. The air was cool and smelled faintly of leather and money. Men and women in impeccably tailored suits moved with a quiet, purposeful confidence that made Maya feel utterly out of place. She approached the main reception desk, a monolithic slab of granite manned by a woman who looked like a high-fashion model. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, her tone polite but cool. "Ah, yes." Maya stammered, her voice feeling small in the cavernous space. "I'm Maya Thompson. I have a 10:00 a.m. appointment with Eleanor Vance." The receptionist typed her name into a sleek, embedded monitor. Her eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. "Ah, yes, Ms. Thompson. We've been expecting you. Please take the express elevator to the 60th floor. Miss Vance's office is directly ahead. The 60th floor, the top floor, the executive floor." The knot in Maya's stomach tightened. The express elevator was a silent, terrifyingly fast capsule of glass and chrome. It rocketed upwards, the city of Boston, shrinking below her into a toy-like map. When the doors whispered open on the 60th floor, She stepped out into a space of breathtaking minimalist elegance. The walls were adorned with original modern art, the furniture was sleek and sculptural, and the panoramic windows offered a godlike view of the entire city and the harbour beyond. A woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver hair, pulled back in a severe but stylish bun, rose from behind a large mahogany desk. She was dressed in a powerful dark grey suit. "Ms. Thompson, I'm Eleanor Vance," she said, her voice crisp and direct. She didn't offer a smile, but she didn't seem unkind either. Just formidable. "Thank you for coming. Please follow me." Maya followed her into a large corner conference room. One wall was entirely glass overlooking the city. A long, polished table dominated the room with a dozen high-backed leather chairs. This was where decisions that affected thousands of people and billions of dollars were made. "Please have a seat," Eleanor said, gesturing to one of the chairs. She sat opposite Maya, placing a thin file folder on the table. It had Maya's name on it. "I'll be direct, Ms. Thompson." Eleanor began opening the folder. "This is not a conventional interview." I gathered that Maya said, finding a sliver of her voice. Eleanor looked up, a hint of appreciation in her eyes. "Good. We have your resume. Bachelor of Science in Economics, magna cum laude. Impressive. But you have no corporate experience. For the past 2 years you've been employed as a waitress at a cafe called the Gilded Spoon. Until last Tuesday, that is." Maya's blood ran cold. They knew. Of course they knew. "But how I'm going to ask you a few questions," Eleanor continued, her gaze steady and intense. "And I want you to answer them honestly. There are no right or wrong answers, but there are truthful ones. First question. Why did you defend the man at the cafe Maya was thrown? She had expected questions about her 5-year plan or her greatest weakness, not a psychoanalysis of the worst day of her life. She took a moment to gather her thoughts. "Because it was the right thing to do," she said simply. No one should be treated that way. His dignity was being stripped from him for sport, and no one was doing anything to stop it. I couldn't just stand there and watch. "Even though you knew it could cost you your job," Eleanor pressed. "I didn't think about that at the moment," Maya admitted. "But even if I had, I think I would have done it anyway. Some things are more important than a job." "And what are those things in your opinion?" Integrity Maya said, without hesitation. "Compassion. Respect. Standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves." Eleanor made a small note in the file. "Chadwick Sterling III is the son of Richard Sterling, the CEO of a rival firm. Did you know that?" "No, I had no idea." "Does that information change your perspective on your actions?" Maya thought for a second. "No. It doesn't matter who he was. His behavior was unacceptable." Eleanor closed the folder. The interview, it seemed, was over. It had lasted less than 5 minutes. Maya's heart sank. She had failed some bizarre secret test. This was all just a colossal waste of time, a strange game played by the ultra-rich. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Thompson." Eleanor said, her voice neutral. "The CEO will see you now." Maya's brain short-circuited. The CEO. Before Eleanor could reply, a large, solid oak door at the far end of the conference room swung open. A figure stepped through. He was wearing an exquisitely tailored navy blue suit, a crisp white shirt, and a simple, elegant tie. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. His posture was commanding, radiating an aura of quiet, unshakable authority. But it wasn't the suit or the posture that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. It was his face. It was the kind, wrinkled face of the old gentleman from the cafe, the man she had defended, the man who had been reading Meditations, and whom Chad had called a relic from a park bench. He walked towards her, a small, knowing smile on his lips. His eyes, the same wise, gentle eyes she remembered met hers. "Hello, Maya," said Arthur Vance, the reclusive multi-billionaire CEO of Vance Consolidated Holdings. "I believe we've met." The world tilted on its axis. Maya stared dumbfounded at the man standing before her. The tweed jacket and worn boots were gone, replaced by the unmistakable armor of corporate power, but the man was the same. The quiet gentleman she had defended wasn't just a random stranger. He was Arthur Vance, one of the most powerful men in the country. 1,000 thoughts crashed through her mind at once. Was this a test, a setup? Some bizarre reality show for bored billionaires? Arthur Vance seemed to read her confusion. He pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down, gesturing for her to remain seated. Eleanor Vance gave a slight, respectful nod and quietly exited the room, closing the oak doors behind her. "Please don't be alarmed," Arthur said, his voice the same calm, gentle tone she remembered from the cafe, though now it carried an undercurrent of immense authority. "This is not a game, I assure you, and you are not here by mistake." "But—" "I don't understand," Maya managed to say, her voice trembling slightly. "You were at the cafe." "You." He confirmed. "And what you saw was real. I often spend afternoons in unassuming places around the city. I find it helps one stay connected to the world as it actually is, not as it appears from the 60th floor of a skyscraper." He gestured to the panoramic window. "It's a habit my board of directors finds eccentric. They prefer I travel with a security detail." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "What happened at the Gilded Spoon was not a test, Maya. I didn't orchestrate it. It was simply a genuine and unfortunately common display of arrogance and cruelty. What I could not have planned for, however, was your reaction." He paused, letting his words sink in. "In my line of work, I am surrounded by people who tell me what they think I want to hear. They are experts in managing perceptions, in navigating corporate politics. They are smart, yes, but their compass is often calibrated to ambition and self-interest. True character, the kind that reveals itself under pressure with no expectation of reward. That is the rarest and most valuable commodity in the world." He looked directly at her. "When you stood up to Mr. Sterling, you weren't defending a billionaire. You were defending a nameless old man you thought was poor and powerless. You sacrificed your only source of income, the very thing you needed, to care for your mother, for a principle. You showed more courage and integrity in those 5 minutes than I have seen in many boardrooms over 20 years. Maya felt a blush creep up her neck. She was still reeling from the shock, unable to fully process the praise. "That's why you're here," he continued. "Eleanor, my niece, by the way, conducted a thorough but discreet background check. We learned about your degree, your academic performance, and your difficult personal circumstances. Maya, you are a brilliant woman who has been dealt a tough hand. The world has overlooked you. I am not in the habit of overlooking talent like that." He slid the file folder Eleanor had left across the table to her. "The job offer is real, executive assistant to the CEO. But I want you to understand what it truly entails. The title is a formality. What I am offering you is an opportunity, a mentorship. You will be in every meeting. You will have access to every file. You will be my eyes and ears. I will teach you everything I know about finance negotiations and leadership. Your official salary will be $254 to start, and we will take care of your mother's medical expenses, completely effective immediately. Consider it a signing bonus." Tears welled in Maya's eyes. Her mother's bills, gone. Just like that. The crushing weight that had suffocated her for years was suddenly lifted. It was too much to comprehend. Why she whispered the single word encompassing all her disbelief. "Why do all this for me?" Arthur's expression softened. "Because I believe in you." But he added a shrewd glint in his eye. "There is also a more strategic reason." He leaned in conspiratorially. "Your new friend Chad Sterling and his father Richard are the CEO and chairman of Sterling Industries. For the past 6 months, Vance Consolidated has been in the final stages of negotiating a massive $50 billion merger with them. It is the biggest deal of my career. This was the twist, the piece of the puzzle Maya never could have imagined. The deal has been championed by many on my board," Arthur explained. "On paper, it makes perfect sense. It would create the largest sustainable energy company in the world. But I have had reservations. Something about Richard Sterling's way of doing business has always felt wrong to me. He's slick, ruthless, and he cuts corners. But I could never prove it." He tapped a finger on the table for emphasis. "And then I saw his son, his heir, apparent in action. I saw the culture that man has fostered, a culture of entitlement, cruelty, and a complete lack of respect for others. A man who behaves that way in public, who treats the little people with such contempt, will undoubtedly run a company the same way. He'll cut safety regulations, he'll underpay his employees, he'll poison a community to save a few dollars. The apple, as they say, doesn't fall far from the tree." He looked at Maya, his eyes alight with a new understanding. "Your actions that day didn't just show me your character, Maya. They gave me a priceless window into the soul of the company I was about to merge with. You gave me the one piece of data that all my analysts and financial models could never provide a measure of their character. And for that, you are worth far more to this company than any salary we could ever pay you." The scope of it all finally hit her. This wasn't just about a job. She had stumbled into the very heart of a high-stakes corporate battle. Her small act of defiance in a coffee shop had sent ripples that were about to become a tidal wave in the world of high finance. So Arthur Vance said, leaning back in his chair, "The job is yours if you want it. It will not be easy. The people on this floor will test you. They will see a waitress and doubt you at every turn. You will have to prove them wrong. But I will be here to guide you." "What do you say?" Maya looked out the window at the city sprawling beneath her. Just a few days ago, she had been down there, lost in the crowd, invisible and desperate. Now she was at the top of the world being offered a chance she never could have dreamed of. She thought of her mother, of the bills, of the constant struggle. And she thought of the fire she had felt in that cafe, the feeling of finally doing something that mattered. She turned back to Arthur Vance, the tears in her eyes now replaced by a look of steely determination. When do I starting her new life was like learning to breathe underwater. The 60th floor of Vance Consolidated was a world unto itself, with its own language, customs, and predators. On her first day, Arthur personally introduced her to the senior executive team, a collection of sharp, ambitious individuals who looked at her with thinly veiled skepticism. He introduced her simply as my new executive assistant and special advisor, a title that was intentionally vague and immediately set the corporate rumor mill churning. Her primary antagonist emerged almost instantly. His name was Julian Croft, a senior vice president in his early 30s with a Harvard MBA and an ego to match. He was handsome, slick, and had clearly been positioning himself as Arthur's heir apparent. Maya's sudden arrival, her mysterious closeness to the CEO, was a direct threat to his ambitions. Julian made his disdain for her clear from the start. He called her the Waitress in hushed tones with his colleagues. He would accidentally leave her off important email chains or schedule meetings without informing her. During one high-level strategy session about the Sterling merger, Maya offered a tentative suggestion. Julian had cut her off with a condescending smirk. "With all due respect, Maya," he'd said, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "perhaps we should leave the multi-billion-dollar M&A strategy to those of us with a bit more experience than, say, managing a cappuccino machine." The other executives had chuckled nervously, looking to Arthur for his reaction. Arthur had remained impassive, but later in his office he had given Maya a crucial piece of advice. "They see your past as a weakness, Maya. You must learn to use it as your strength. You have a perspective they lost long ago, if they ever had it at all. Don't try to be like them. Be you. Your voice is the most valuable one in that room, precisely because it's different." Maya took his words to heart. She stopped trying to mimic the corporate jargon and instead began to apply her own unique lens to the problems at hand. She worked relentlessly, arriving before anyone else, and leaving long after. She devoured every file, every report, every market analysis, her sharp mind for economics finally being put to use. She wasn't just learning, she was absorbing, synthesizing, and seeing patterns that the others missed. Her breakthrough moment came during a deep dive into the Sterling merger proposal. The deal was structured to create massive synergies, a corporate euphemism for firing thousands of employees from both companies to cut costs. The entire executive team, including Julian, saw this as a necessary and profitable part of the deal. But Maya saw something else. She spent a week cross-referencing Sterling Industries' employee turnover rates, their factory safety records, and online reviews from former employees. She built a case, not with complex financial models, but with human data. In the next board meeting, she presented her findings. "The projected cost savings from these layoffs are an illusion," she began, her voice clear and confident. She brought up a slide showing the high turnover rate at Sterling's manufacturing plants. Sterling Industries has a toxic corporate culture driven from the top down. We saw a public example of it ourselves. She glanced briefly at Arthur. "They underpay their skilled labor, they ignore safety complaints, and they treat their employees as disposable. If we merge, that toxicity will infect our company." Julian scoffed. "This is sentimental nonsense. We're talking about shareholder value, not holding a company-wide sing-along." Maya didn't flinch. "I'm talking about shareholder value too, Julian. A company with a disengaged, resentful workforce is an inefficient company. It's a company that will suffer from lower productivity, higher training costs, and more workplace accidents. If we lay off thousands of people in the cold, brutal way Sterling is proposing, the remaining employees at both companies will be terrified and demoralized." Furthermore, she continued, clicking to her next slide, "the reputational damage will be immense. Vance has built its brand on integrity and being a good corporate citizen. The media will have a field day with this. The titans of industry create jobs bonfire. Headlines write themselves. The hit to our stock price from the ensuing PR nightmare will wipe out any projected savings from the layoffs." She had reframed the argument. She used their own language, shareholder value, stock price, PR, risk, to make a case for compassion. She wasn't the sentimental waitress anymore. She was a sharp strategist who saw the human element as a critical variable in the financial equation. The room was silent. The executives who had initially dismissed her were now looking at the data she presented with dawning realization. She had connected dots they hadn't even seen. Arthur Vance, who had remained silent throughout her presentation, finally spoke. "Thank you, Maya. An excellent and insightful analysis." He looked around the table at his stunned team. "This is why she is here. She sees the whole board, not just the pieces in front of her. From that day on, things began to shift. The whispers about the Waitress died down. Colleagues started coming to her for her opinion. Julian Croft still treated her with icy disdain, but it was now tinged with a grudging respect. Maya was no longer the CEO's pet project. She was a force to be reckoned with. She was also changing. Her old apologetic posture was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. She dressed in sharp, elegant business attire that Arthur's personal shopper had helped her select. She spoke with authority, but she never lost the empathy that had gotten her there. She made a point of knowing the names of the janitorial staff and the baristas in the ground-floor coffee shop. She remembered what it was like to be invisible, and she vowed never to make anyone else feel that way. The final vote on the Sterling merger was fast approaching. Richard Sterling and his son Chad were scheduled to come to the Vance headquarters for a final presentation to the board. It would be the first time Maya would see Chad since that day at the Gilded Spoon. The stage was set for a final dramatic confrontation, not in a small cafe, but in the biggest boardroom in the city, with $50 billion on the line. The day of the final board meeting was electric with tension. The 60th floor conference room, usually a place of calm, measured power, felt like a pressure cooker. Maya stood beside Arthur Vance, looking out the panoramic window as they waited for the Sterling delegation to arrive. She was wearing a tailored navy blue dress that was almost the exact shade of the suit Arthur had worn when he first revealed himself to her. It was a silent nod to their shared journey. Nervous, Arthur asked quietly. A little Maya admitted. It just feels surreal. A few months ago he was getting me fired over a drop of water. Now I'm about to help decide the fate of his $50 billion deal. This is not about revenge. Maya Arthur said, his tone gentle but firm. It is about diligence. It is about protecting this company and the people who work for it. Remember the principles you stood for in that cafe. They are the same principles that must guide us today. Let the truth do the work. Just then, the doors opened, and Eleanor Vance escorted Richard and Chad Sterling into the room. Richard Sterling was a handsome, silver-haired man with a predator's smile and cold, calculating eyes. His son Chad followed him, like a loyal, if slightly dim shadow. Chad's eyes scanned the room full of the usual arrogance. Then he saw Maya. His brain took a moment to compute. He saw the waitress from the cafe, the woman he'd had fired, standing at the right hand of the legendary Arthur Vance, looking as if she owned the place. His face went through a rapid series of expressions, confusion, disbelief, and finally a sneer of utter contempt. "Well, well," Chad said loudly, a smirk spreading across his face. "Look what we have here. I knew your company was diversifying its hiring, Arthur, but I didn't realize you'd started a work release program with the local diner. What are you doing here, sweetheart? Taking our coffee order?" The insult, so similar to the one he'd used before, hung in the silent room. But this time, Maya didn't flinch. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Julian Croft watched, a fascinated expression on his face. Before Maya could respond, Arthur Vance raised a hand. "Chadwick, your father is here to present a business proposal, not to audition, for a stand-up comedy routine. Maya is my special advisor, and I would suggest you afford her the same respect you would afford me." Arthur's voice was ice. Chad's smirk faltered, and he shot a nervous glance at his father. Richard Sterling's smile was strained. He clearly had not been prepared for this variable. "My apologies," Arthur Richard said smoothly. "My son's sense of humor can be robust." "Shall we begin for the next hour?" Richard and Chad presented their vision for the merged companies. It was a slick, polished presentation filled with impressive projections and corporate buzzwords. They painted a picture of a global powerhouse dominating the market and delivering unprecedented returns. When they finished, Arthur Vance turned to his board. "Thank you, Richard." Questions one by one, the board members asked standard questions about financials and logistics. Richard and Chad answered them with practiced ease. It seemed to be going their way. Then Arthur turned. "Maya, do you have any questions for our guests?" This was it. Every eye in the room swiveled to her. Chad Sterling looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. Maya stood up, holding a tablet with her research. She walked calmly to the head of the table. "Thank you, Arthur," she said, her voice ringing with clarity and confidence. "Mr. Sterling, your presentation focuses heavily on the financial benefits of the merger. I'd like to focus on the human capital. Your proposal calls for the immediate termination of over 3,000 employees. My analysis shows that your company, Sterling Industries, has a rate of employee litigation for wrongful termination and unsafe working conditions that is 400% higher than the industry average. How do you explain that?" Richard was taken aback. "All large companies face litigation. It's the cost of doing business." Perhaps Maya countered. "But my concern is the culture this litigation represents. A culture where employees are seen as costs to be cut, not assets to be valued. This brings me to my next point." She looked directly at Chad. "Mr. Sterling, Jr., you are the heir apparent to this company. You are the future of its leadership." On the afternoon of August 12th, at a cafe called The Gilded Spoon, you publicly and cruelly humiliated an elderly man over a perceived slight. You then demanded that I, an employee of that establishment, be fired for defending him. Chad's face turned a blotchy, furious red. "This is outrageous. What does that have to do with anything?" "It has everything to do with everything," Maya said, her voice rising with passion. "It is a real-world, practical demonstration of the Sterling Industries corporate culture. A culture of arrogance, of punching down, of believing that money and power give you the right to be cruel and unaccountable. A company is not its balance sheet, it is its people, and the character of its leadership determines the character of the company. If we merge with you, we are not just merging assets, we are merging cultures. And your culture, Mr. Sterling, is fundamentally incompatible with the values that have made Vance Consolidated successful for 50 years. She turned to the board. "The risks I outlined weeks ago are not hypothetical. The face of that risk is sitting right here in this room. This deal is not just financially unsound in the long term, it is morally bankrupt." She had laid it all bare, the truth raw and undeniable. The silence that followed was absolute. Richard Sterling was speechless, his polished facade shattered. Chad was sputtering, unable to form a coherent sentence. Arthur Vance stood up. "Thank you, Maya." He then addressed the Sterling duo, his voice low and final. "Gentlemen, my advisor has made her point with more eloquence than I ever could. She has shown us the truth. We will not be moving forward with this merger. Not now, not ever. This meeting is over." The humiliation of the Sterlings was total and complete. They gathered their things in a stunned daze and were escorted out by Eleanor. The moment the doors closed, the boardroom erupted. The board members who had been on the fence were now looking at Maya with awe and unadulterated respect. She had saved them from a catastrophic mistake. Julian Croft walked over to her, extending a hand. "I was wrong about you," he said. "That was brilliant." Later that evening, Maya stood with Arthur in his office, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The city lights began to twinkle on a galaxy of possibilities spread out before her. You did it, Maya, Arthur said, a proud smile on his face. You stood your ground, you spoke the truth, and you won. We won. She corrected him, a smile playing on her lips. Indeed. He chuckled. He looked out at the city. That job, executive assistant, I think it's time for a promotion. I'm creating a new department, corporate culture and ethical strategy. And I want you to run it as a vice president. Maya's eyes widened. Vice president, the girl who had been crying over a 280 bank balance just a few months ago. She looked at Arthur, her heart filled with a gratitude so immense it felt like it might burst. He hadn't just given her a job. He had given her a future. He had seen the person she was and given her the chance to become the person she was always meant to be. Her journey was far from over, but standing there at the top of the world, she knew one thing for certain. One small act of courage of standing up for what is right can be the most powerful investment you ever make. It can change a life. It can change an empire. It can change the world. Maya Thompson's story is a powerful reminder that our true worth isn't defined by our job title or our bank account, but by the choices we make when no one is watching or when everyone is. She risked her livelihood for a simple act of human decency, and in doing so unlocked a future beyond her wildest dreams. Her story proves that integrity is not a weakness in a cutthroat world. It is the ultimate strength. It reminds us that empathy and compassion are not just soft skills, but are essential tools for true, lasting success. Every single day we are all faced with choices, big and small. We can choose to look away, or we can choose to take a stand. What did you think of Maya's incredible journey? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between what was easy and what was right? Let us know in the comments below. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unbelievable true stories that will restore your faith in humanity. Thank you for listening.